Thank you for being here for the Q&A for the film Mayor. You have been, this film is part of the 29th Woods Hole Film Festival, which is a film festival that traditionally happens for 8 days every year from the last Saturday of July through the first Saturday of August. Generally, we are taking place as an in-person event in Woods Hole. We have thousands of people running up and down the streets, trying to cross the bridge in time to get to the screenings. We are in 5 venues. There's an air of excitement and creativity in town. But this year, because of the pandemic, we've taken all that, we've wrapped it up, and we had to create this in the virtual world. Although we had very little time to kind of figure out how to be a virtual film festival, we are thrilled that we had so many great films to present. We have 187 films in this year's festival, which is the most ever. The great thing about a virtual festival is that there is enough room for all the films we want to show. There are no capacity problems. And so we hope that you've gotten to see a lot of the films. We do know that because of popular demand, people wanted more time. So we were able to extend the festival through Monday, August 3rd at midnight. So if you are a subscriber, a pass holder, keep watching the films. Every film in the festival is eligible for both an audience and a jury award. So please vote on the films that you've seen. We will give the awards on Sunday, August 16th, and we will do the presentation live streamed via Facebook. We'll have more details about that on our website very soon. A festival like this could not happen without the support of many people, all of our sponsors, our donors, our filmmakers, our patrons, you, the audience. Thank you very much for being with us and for supporting what we've done for the past 29 years. So without further ado, I'm gonna bring in Eric Metzgar. Oh wait, let me just, a few housekeeping details. This is a webinar. The way it works is generally Eric and I are gonna chat for about 20 minutes or so. If you have questions that you would like to ask, please type them into the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and get to them if time allows during this 45-minute Q&A. So, and please keep your mics muted during that time. So I'm gonna introduce Eric Metzgar. Eric is the editor of the film Mayor. Unfortunately, David had a last-minute change and couldn't be with us, but we're gonna ask Eric everything we would have asked David, and I told him make up the answers if you don't know it. So hopefully I will be nice and ask you some questions that you know the answers to. But thank you very much for being here, Eric.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, so excited to have the film in the festival, and wish David could be here, but you have to settle for the editor.
We're settling. Well, I mean, so let's start a little bit about the film. We can't assume that everybody who's with us today has seen it. So can you just sort of set the stage for what the story is, and then we'll talk about how the story was crafted. You're the crafter.
So the director, David Ossett, got access, really incredible access, to the mayor of Ramallah in Palestine. And it's the de facto capital of Palestine. And it's a Christian city. And it's a quite wealthy city. I think it's a very sort of odd place to live, because in a sense it's a bubble. You know, life feels it could almost be described as Switzerland or something, in that it's a bustling city, but it's surrounded by settlements, and there are more than occasional incursions by Israeli troops. There are checkpoints everywhere, and the film is really an experience of watching a mayor with very limited capacity to control his city. He's trying to lead with one hand tied behind his back, really, because he can, well, almost every issue he runs into the Israeli government, it constrains the decisions that he can make. So the people that he's leading are asking a lot of him, and I think don't realize the limitations that he's up against. So he's got a really unique job, because he's got great vision, and he's a terrific guy, terrific leader. But to watch him amidst these constraints and given the situation over there, it's a really fascinating situation that David got access to. And I think he followed him for a year or so during the time when the embassy was moved, when Trump announced the embassy move, which really sort of sparks the story.
So one question I find curious, so the title mayor, I guess I don't necessarily associate with cities in other countries. I don't know why, but I think of that kind of as an American title. How was he, uh, was he elected? Is
He
there a
was
popular
elected.
vote?
Yeah, he was elected. Yep.
And how long has he been the mayor?
Oh, good question. I don't know exactly. I think he's in his second term. Oh, I'll probably get this wrong, but I think he's been mayor 3, 4-ish years or so. Yeah.
So the film really sort of is a year in the life kind of film.
Yeah, yeah, David would come and go throughout the course of a year, perhaps longer. Um, and he's just sort of rides around in Musa. His name is Musa Hadid. He rides around in Musa's pocket, and there are a lot of um, sort of administrative meetings where you get to see the constraints that he's stuck within, but then there are a few scenarios that I don't want to really ruin, but that David finds himself in that are extremely dangerous when Israeli troops come into town, and Musa sort of tries to, hold a strong front.
How did David come to be the filmmaker of this story?
Yeah, David had spent time there. I think he had studied over there as a student, I think before turning officially to film as a career, and had a sense that there was a really unique situation happening over there. And then at one point committed himself to going and finding access.
And so you said he shot for about a year,
Yeah,
a little
I
bit
think it
more.
was I think it was over a year because he went back during the edit to capture some more scenes. Um, I think he was filming for a month or so before, and it was going to be more day in the life of a mayor in Palestine. Um, and then one day, while David was in Musa's office, Musa learned that Trump had decided to move the embassy, which, for Palestine, Ramallah is just an enormous deal. So there were protests, and suddenly the question became, how do you handle that as the mayor, who can't do anything about it, but you need to say something, and what can you say safely? There's a very fine line that this guy has to walk.
So, when filmmakers get access to stories that are controversial or that have implications, um, they get this access because the subjects trust them and they want their stories told. Um, the story of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, the whole Middle East in general, is ever changing and ever evolving. Um, the people who decided to let themselves be filmed, particularly the mayor, I mean, what do you think they were thinking? Why would they want a film made about them?
Well, I think Israel gets a lot of the attention and the press, and their messages come out strongly. And I think that Palestine's messages are, well, I mean, there are many messages, but in terms of Musa and Ramallah, I think that he was excited to have people see what they were up to and what a progressive city it is. and everything they're attempting to do and be. And David is, he's just a very smart guy. And I think Musa looked at his track record, and David's last film won an Emmy. And I think he knew he would be in really good hands with David. And, David did the work of spending time there before you turn a camera on to really show that you're committed. You're not just going to kind of go in and extract the story and never come back. That David was really there for the long haul.
So do you think that this is sort of a hearts and minds film, and the reason that the mayor let himself be portrayed in this way is because he is hoping to have an effect on policymakers and decision makers, but also just people and how they view.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I could see Musa always trying um, ha to have people witness the authentic plight, the conundrum that they're in. They're doing their best in Ramallah to find partner countries and cities around the world so that they can have allies, because they're just so isolated and dominated by what's going on in Israel and by Israel. And so I think it was a chance for a Western set of eyes to come in and take that out to audiences around the world, which fortunately David's, the film's doing well and it's getting out there, and I imagine it'll get a wide broadcast. I mean, myself, I wasn't someone who was on a daily basis tracking the Israel-Palestine conflict. I knew the basics, the 101, 102 basics. And I didn't know Ramallah existed. I didn't understand how important that place was symbolically to Palestinian people. And so it was a real education for me. And if I can judge my experience, if I can judge others by my experience, there are probably a lot of people in my situation where you understand the conflict, but you haven't spent time on the ground there with people really watching their day-to-day lives and what they're up to. And so this film, I hope, can do that for a lot of people.
So, let's get to your role in the project. So you are the editor.
I edited with David, yeah.
With David, okay. So I
Yeah.
was going to say, like, at what point did you come into that film?
David, I think pretty early. He, as you're gathering funding with documentaries and you're directing, you're sort of on your own for a while. And to get funding, you're cutting little scenes as the director. Almost everyone in the documentary world knows how to edit. You just sort of have to. So he had cut some scenes, some samples to get funding, and he'd gotten some good funding from some good sources in the doc world, and had written a really, really specific and concise sort of treatment of the film, of the story as he saw it, which became really the skeleton of how we approached the edit. And so I came on quite early, and we broke down his treatment into beats, and we were pretty surgical about breaking everything into scenes, and we would split up scenes and pass them back and forth. And it was all a matter of really finding the tone, because David didn't want to do a sentimental film. He didn't want to do an academic film. He didn't even want to do a a blatantly political film. He really wanted to do a humanistic portrayal, and he wanted to also highlight, I don't want to call it the comedy of it, but the levity of it, the predicament that this mayor finds himself in, with one hand tied behind his back with every decision he makes, can lead to some comic situations. And you can see in the film that the things that he can control, like the Christmas party and how many Santas are going to come down from the roof, or the building of the new fountain, um, there is something funny that he is, in a sense, fighting for survival, and yet all he can channel his passions into is these small symbolic projects. And David really wanted to use that to show this guy's situation. And I think it worked. I think it was a really good call.
I kind of liked it. Forget the exact scene, but there was a scene around a waste problem, we'll just say. And he was as mad at the people who are creating the problem or throwing the trash in the street or not doing what they should be doing, like right in front of him, as he would be about a greater injustice to the Palestinian cause. So they say all politics is local, right? But I think he really embodies that too. Not necessarily that he was acting politically, but that as mayor, he felt like he had so many responsibilities, or has so many responsibilities, and he's trying to do so many things at once. It's hard to do everything in a linear function, and so he just does it as it happens.
Yeah, and he knows the battles he can fight. He wants to be fighting the big battles, but he's relegated to fighting these little battles, and so he can really vent. I mean, like you can see him venting in that situation with the waste, where he's carrying the weight of the city on his shoulders, and it all sort of funnels out into this frustration about, we can't even do this cleanup without me discovering another problem where Israel is dumping their waste into our land. And what can I do about it? Nothing. And so I'm just going to get upset, understandably so.
Yeah. We actually have a question. Somebody's asking, is there anything that David wanted to film or include and was not able to do so? Was he restricted at all?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about restricted, but he uh, he really wanted to include the settlements that were surrounding Ramallah, and um, there were some issues with access and sort of whether or not that felt tangential to the story, because once the story gains momentum, we found that it was a little difficult to leave Musa, the mayor, and go for the sake of sort of exposition to go show the audience other things. So unless Musa went to the settlement, it didn't feel right for us as filmmakers to just pull the story over to the settlements. So we ended up not going there. There is, yeah, there. I mean, there is a lot of good material. There was a, there were several subplots. One was about tourism. There's teeny pieces of it in, but there was a character who would give tours there, and he was not a fan of mooses, and we were going to follow him as a way to kind of counterbalance Musa, but we didn't have the real estate to really go into that. Um, there were several issues where Musa gets some criticism about um, wanting to expand the city and modernize the city, um, which some which some Palestinians want, but also maintain the old buildings and the historical sites. And it is very difficult for him to find the sweet spot and please both groups, because he understands both things. He wants the traditional historic buildings, but he also understands the need to modernize the country and to get out of 2G Wi-Fi and move it up into 3 and 4 and get people sort of up to speed in the world so that they can catch up and keep up. So he would get it from all sides about destruction of property. So we get into that a bit, but there is quite a lot more that David, I think, at one point hoped to get in, but it becomes just a matter of real estate.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated and multifaceted story. I do think you probably really have to focus.
Yeah, we also had more with his children in there because it was quite interesting to hear from his kids, who are probably now late teenagers, early 20s, and their not only their ideas about their dad and how they feel about their dad who is working 20 hours a day, but his vision of Palestine and his maybe inability at times to um, let go of older visions, older ideas of what should be, um, and compare that with his children who have a, I would say personally, maybe my view of them is that they have a more accepting view of what's happening, sort of like, this is what we've got. Should I stay or should I just go to the United States and just sort of start anew? Whereas his feet are rooted there. He's not giving up ever. And his kids have, I think, more of an attitude of, this might be a losing battle. You know, we might not win this one, and if so, how do I want to spend my life? Because I don't know if I want to spend it like you, fighting this fight every day of my life. I may be overgeneralizing there, but I found the kids really fascinating, and we had a few more scenes and with them, but again, real estate, you at some point you have to start shaving.
What do you think would happen to him if he got what he wanted? Because he'd still be mayor.
Yeah,
Now he'd have more. He'd have more things that he'd have to do.
yeah. Well, wow, it's a tough question.
Because I,
I
you
mean,
know, I
they want freedom. I mean, of course, they just freedom is it, and dignity. They want to not be controlled. You know, he says in that scene in that meeting that he wants to be able to not. He wants to be able to take a drive and not be stopped at a checkpoint and be frisked. You know, as this mayor, this successful individual, that he doesn't want to be frisked by a teenage Israeli soldier at a checkpoint. It's just infuriating, and to just be so powerless and have an American president on a whim for political reasons make this decision to move the embassy and have nothing you can do about it. It's just such a feeling of impotence. It's terrible.
yeah, I felt really sorry for him in the. I don't want to call it a scene. It wasn't really a scene, but when I guess it was the embassy being moved was like big news, and he's like, "How can we see this? We don't have cable.
Yeah.
Get me the newspaper. I shouldn't have to find out about this from somebody else." Is that what the issue was?
Yeah, his priest told him the news that the
Yeah.
embassy was moving, and I think he felt a little embarrassed that he didn't know already. But as you see, they had just moved into a new office, and you know, every technology is slower there. So, like I was saying, they're doing their best to modernize, but I think he was still in 2G, and he didn't have a TV in his office, and doesn't understand how the channels work and the Wi-Fi, and so it's hard to stay up to date.
So Ramallah. Now I'm going to show my ignorance. Um, the the largest city in the Palestinian territories. Is that true?
I don't know if it's the largest, actually. I don't know either.
But it's the capital, or it's considered the
The de
capital,
facto capital.
de facto capital.
Yeah.
And what does that actually mean as the capital? Does government reside there?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yes, people consider it the capital. I think it's 10 minutes from Jerusalem, but they can't go there. Um, so it's the center of commerce and culture. Yeah.
I think the one thing that people will be kind of surprised at, I know I was, is just sort of whenever the Middle East is portrayed, countries, cities in various countries, it's usually in relationship to a military conflict or some sort of conflict where you see buildings bombed out and people being harmed or really bad things happening. You don't usually see the positive side of how people live. And I think one of the things about this film that is really important is for whatever audience sees this, it will be sort of probably a reimagining of the narrative of that whole, of how people in that part of the world live. And right? Am I right about that? Do you think?
Yeah, for sure. David was really clear about wanting to do that. He was really versed in the films about the conflict over there and really wanted to present a new look a new window into life in Palestine. And Ramallah was just, a very good choice for place to do that, because it's not, when you think of Palestine, I certainly did not think of life in Ramallah. I didn't know that a Christian city existed in Palestine. Um, and so, we would talk, because we also had access to some archival footage about the Intifada and stuff, and he didn't want to play cards that had already been played before in other films. He really wanted to make a very specific film that would show something that people hadn't seen, and didn't want to fall back onto dramas that people were expecting, um, which is really refreshing. I think is really refreshing, and I think it's, one of the main reasons the film is getting a lot of good reviews, is that he's really done what you're supposed to do as a filmmaker, which is show people something new, get this very special access to something and show it. So it's that I was super inspired by that.
I wonder, do you know, like, where has this film been seen so far?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the list lately, but it's played quite a number of festivals in the States, and then it's played Copenhagen, and where else is it played abroad? I think it's playing Melbourne, or just played Melbourne. Um, I haven't asked him about the festival circuit recently, but my guess is he's probably halfway through it, and he's had some offers for distribution, and I think he's weighing his options.
Has he had a chance to show it in Ramallah or in
I
Israel?
don't think so. I know Musa has seen it himself. I mean, of course, with COVID, it's very unfortunate, because Musa was going to come and be at the screenings, which would be really fantastic. I imagine that'll happen in a year or so. I imagine they'll arrange some screenings where Musa can come and speak for the film, which will be really great.
Um, what is David's hope for the film? You know, we talk a lot in conversations about documentaries about impact. We talked about that a little bit yesterday in relationship with Bato, but does he want this to be used as a tool for creating change, or does he just see himself as a storyteller?
I'm sure both, although, David's a real subtle filmmaker, so he's not the kind of filmmaker who's going to have a message at the end where you text to some organization or give money. He's he's really a nuanced storyteller, and I think that his goal here, was to really, I mean, he knows the conflict really well, and I think he knows that people don't understand that this side of it exists. And so I think he comes at it from a very human perspective. I don't think he wants to tell anyone what to think, but I think he wants to show the the sort of human collateral damage of the conflict over there, and and that a lot of the stereotypes and narratives that we have from the conflict are really reductive, and um, wanted to show a non-sensational, also not uh, just pure victim uh, portrayal of life in Ramallah. And he was really clear about that too, was to say, obviously their plight over there is very, it's easy to be very sympathetic towards them, but he wanted to make it as complex as possible and show that, um, well, in many ways they have no agency, that they're still trying to be the masters of their fate. And how are they doing that? How are they finding joy? How are they going on with their lives? How are they protesting and standing up to things? And yeah, just to give the audience another view.
So, you know, as somebody who helped in the editing or did a majority of the editing here, did this story change you at all?
Well, I didn't do the majority of the editing, just to be, yeah.
I'm giving
Yeah,
you credit.
David and I really split it, but he really led the charge. Oh, for sure. Like I said, I had a 101, kind of 102 understanding of the conflict over there that came through CNN and the New York Times and a couple of documentaries I saw over the last 10 years. But the way that David approached this story, particularly where he was really looking for levity, really looking for um, just sort of everyday humanity, really allowed me to step back from a kind of space of outrage about the conflict and taking such drastic sides, and allowed me to think about what I would do if I were Musa, or what I would do if I were Musa's administrative assistant, or what I would do if I were Musa's kids. Like, how would I handle that? Would I give up? Would I fight? How would I fight? Um, how would I speak if I were given a platform to speak about what's going on over there? Because that seems to be one of the real points of leverage with Musa's work, is that he really has a microphone. He does a lot of press, and they're embracing social media, and he doesn't want to just say, we're victims, help us. He knows better than that. And yet you'd understand why he could easily lean into that and just say, help, we're really helpless over here. So it really, really made me think about the conflict, and how it, like, what the next steps could be. Um, and I don't have answers, but I think that the way, you know, David decided to build the story really allows the audience to ponder what it would mean to be in their shoes in a place that's not just a place of outrage, which a lot of documentaries try to funnel you to a place of outrage by the end. And I think David didn't really do that. I think he really sort of funneled the audience, in a sense, towards, this is what it looks like to maintain your dignity. I think the fountain thread throughout the film really says, I will do what I can, I will thrive in the things that I can control, and they'll be meaningful.
Well, I really appreciated the fact that didn't include sort of the historical references,
Mm-hmm.
because I think trying to tell that narrative, A, is hard in a short film, and B, would have, by the very nature of it, changed the story. It would have been less about humans and it would have been more about war and fighting. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's really powerful when, because documentaries often take the role of just getting deeper into something that most people don't have access to. And I think that's the really great thing about this film is most people would not have access to even knowing about, like me, that there is a mayor of Ramallah, right? We don't think about that because why would I know that? I haven't been
Mm.
there.
Yeah.
But now that we know, now that we're aware, now that it sort of broadens our perspective and wakes us up a little bit more, I think then when you go to read the news or then when you hear how things are described, it gives you an opportunity to have a more discerning understanding of what you're being told and how to see things differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I personally would like to see this. I would like to see more of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what were your takeaways? Like, anything surprising? Were you surprised by anything?
I don't know if I would say I was surprised. I have such little depth of knowledge of how people actually live. I've seen things. I've been to Israel, so I've seen things. I've been to the West Bank. What I do know from having been there is that nothing is black and white,
Mm.
right? These conflicts are years long. I think personally sometimes people even forget why they fight. But I also think that most people do not want to live in a conflict, a dominant, subdominant society.
Yeah.
And I think everybody wants peace. But getting there is just incredibly hard because people have different ideas about what peace is and what that's going to look like. And, you know, the one thing that I do know is that the conversation will still continue.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, that's why I really like this film too, because it's nice to see that even though the mayor feels a certain way now, he is also creating a platform for change for people who come maybe after him
Mm-hmm.
to sort of continue that work. And he's also, because of his perspective, giving other people the ability to think beyond the current time. That's what I came away with.
Yeah. 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 It definitely, it brings up the nature of leadership too. You know, I feel like a different leader could send that city into a really different space, but he always seems to be an adult in the room and non-reactive. David filmed a lot of meetings, and Musa, 99% of the time is really cool and collected and allows everyone to be very reactive and emotional about what's going on outside the walls. And Musa really holds the space of, I've heard all your thoughts and complaints. Now let's do the smartest thing and let's really think about what we're saying, what we're going to say publicly. Let's really, really tailor the message so that it's, you know, it it portrays the pain and the struggle that we're in, but there's also going to be power in it and optimism, and we're going to stand our ground. And I was really impressed by that. Really impressed by that. It's a hard thing to do. I mean, to wake up in his shoes and know what you're up against every day, but also try to lead in those circumstances. It's really, really a challenge. I think that's really sort of what it boiled down to me is how do you lead in conditions like that?
Well, and now I think we're all sort of, that's coming home to all of us, even though if it's not this particular issue, but the nature of leadership
Mm,
is being ripped open. What do we expect from our leaders? How are we going to deal with difficult times when the conflicts aren't between people, but between like the virus and us or whatever? Leadership, I think, is something that really reveals itself in the midst sometimes of an emergency.
for
And those
sure.
people who are able to rise to the occasion then become people that are so valuable because they can also help create a vision and help
Yeah.
create a path forward. So I think, if and when things change, the ability for him to travel with this film would be really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think not only would he probably see that, because maybe he doesn't see the impact of what he has, what he
Mm-hmm.
does in the rest of the world. Maybe
Yeah.
he doesn't know what his story will mean to somebody in a different country. But being able to be there and then meet other people, I think that would affect him as much as it would affect other people.
Yeah, I think he would be very moved and probably overwhelmed by the amount of empathy and sympathy and support that he would get from audiences everywhere when they really get a chance to spend an hour and a half watching what he's dealing with, what they're all dealing with. I think
And I
that's
think that's the great thing about documentaries, especially this kind of documentary, which is, I think we said it earlier, but it's sort of these nuanced slice of life stories that really allow us to step into something we had no idea about. But then we don't want to leave. We don't want to just say that was a film and that was fun. You
mm,
know, a good documentary is going to leave you thinking.
hmm.
You're going to have a continued relationship to that story, and I really think that's what this film has done. And you guys have done an amazing job with this. So thank you for doing
Thanks.
it.
Yeah.
To the audience, we have a few more minutes. This would be the time if you have additional questions to type them into the Q&A. But So Eric, as an editor, you work on a lot of different projects. How do you choose like what films you're going to edit?
Um, well, I also make my own stuff, which I edit as well, and so it's sort of back and forth between doing one on my own, and then as I'm wrapping one up, it usually comes from friends who are filmmakers who say, I'm working on this, and I think I'm don't want to edit it myself. Are you interested in editing it? And we talk about it, and uh, someone like David, he and I knew each other before, and we'd worked a bit together, and I just love his work. So when he asked me if I was interested, it was a no-brainer, because I knew it would be a really solid film and good experience working with him. Uh, these films you work on for a few years, so they become chapters of your life. So I think I try to go where it's new, something new that I don't already know about, and it becomes sort of a master's degree in whatever
Yeah,
you you are studying for a couple of years. You take a deep dive into it, and then the film comes out, and you shift completely to another realm of life, and that's what I really like about it. So it's really just a gut interest, and also I have little kids now, so I'm trying to get a little bit further away from the darker fare. That's just the really deep despair stuff that I'll have to live with for a year, with kids coming in my office and looking over my shoulder at the screen and all of that. Um, so this film was a great opportunity with David, because the tone he was going for was really uh, cool and a good challenge.
yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I'll just say, so Eric also edited another film that's in the festival, Bateau. Another incredible story, beautiful film. I think these two films go together kind of fairly well in some strange way.
They do. They're both very quiet filmmaking. It's not in your face. They're very patient films. They ask the audience to do some work and to be patient. And I really love that style.
But I also think, just running the film festival for so many years, our slogan is bringing the world to your doorstep, one film at a time.
Mm,
And that's what I love, especially about a lot of the documentaries. We get to learn because
yeah.
somebody was out there who wanted to tell that story.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. And we are just about to wrap up. So
Yeah.
I want to say thanks for being with us, Eric. And audience, please do remember to vote. And we have extended the festival through Monday evening. So you have time to watch more films and vote for films for audience awards. So thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Appreciate it.
We'll talk soon. All right.
Okay. Take care.
Bye bye.